All right, the recording's in progress. The AI companion is still struggling to come online, but oh well, we're gonna forge on ahead here. So I believe, oh, this could be um, session 50. This is a milestone. I think last week was 49, so this should be session 50 of Roaming Free Inside the Cage. Starting tonight on page 115. Go back a little bit and get a running start on type 1, which we're going to be hitting the point of avoidance, virtue, and vice tonight. But we're going to back up a little bit into the initial wounding and like I said, get that running start. Before we jump in, anything left over from last week that we need to more fully develop or discuss? I'm gonna have to get a little recording of that song from that game show. Dun, 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 dun. You know, when I put
Dun,
something out
dun,
there like
dun,
that, and
dun,
then
dun, 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 dun.
yeah, that one.
Come on, Jeopardy.
Okay. So this is type 1, and we have our sacrificial lamb type 1s. So we got, what do we got? Judy, we got Jennifer, we've got Gail. We don't have either Bill. Oh, that's right, we don't have Bill. Where's Bill tonight? Well, Gale's Bill is up north getting another alpaca. You know, we're trying to figure out why they need another one of those, but they're going to get one. And then the other Bill, yeah, I was just talking to him this morning. Uh, hope he's okay. All right. So we've got at least the three solid ones, not the two pretend ones. Let us back up and on page 115 under initial wounding and subsequent development, kind of 1/3 of the way down that paragraph on the right-hand side, it says, but embodiment. I'm going to start right there. Okay. And then just to get a running start on when we get into it. So he is saying embodiment threatens the one's capacity to maintain such awareness. What awareness is he talking about? It's the initial state of the infant one that all being, everything that is perfectly itself. It's self-so, right? It's Ziran in Chinese. And so the infant one sees everything as just being exactly itself, expressing itself as it is. But embodiment coming into the world threatens the one's capacity to maintain that awareness. And eventually the one's flowing energy begins to collapse. As ones lose their sense that reality is fundamentally self-so, their awareness begins to narrow. The loss of essence feels like a wave of wrongness. The wave then intensifies. Badness seems everywhere, within the self and without. And the narrowness of vision seems only to increase its intensity. The resulting knot hole is called anger, which is the passion or vice of type 1. Anger is defined by Ichazo as a stand against reality the way it is. It resides in the belly of the one as a kind of cosmic sense that God goofed. The consequent fault-finding relationship to the world thus becomes the one's first distortion of original energy. Around this knothole of anger, the ego of the one begins to crystallize. Now, as children, ones learn to convert their lost sense of perfection into a type of inner effort called improving. And he's going to be talking about that later in this chapter. They kept trying to get it right, to recreate perfection, but all their efforts only took them away from their own instinctual energy. As body types, they came to sense the body itself as a central focal point for wrongness. And with the loss of access to instinctual energy, they lost the internal yardstick for evaluating life. I'm sorry, did I say internal yardstick? They lost the internal yardstick for evaluating life. External yardsticks then had to be found. They became preoccupied with rules and began a lifetime of striving to correct both themselves and those around them. A counterfeit version of the spontaneous experience of Ziran was created. It was called correctness. The need to correct self and everyone else felt like a rush of urgency experienced in a visceral way, even though many of those around them may have seen them as mental types. The urge to correct what is wrong then became the final distortion of their original reconciling energy. Instead of seeking balance, They grew narrow-minded and rigid, seeing only what was wrong and remaining blind to everything else. Um, as I was reading this, I started to think about the relationship between Tao and Confucianism. And I don't know if you're familiar with Confucianism, but I have an external sheet to show you because I think this is kind of a bit of a sidebar, but I think it's interesting. Hopefully you will find it so as well. Otherwise, pay no attention to the next 7 minutes. Confucianism and Taoism. Okay, Confucianism is an ancient Chinese ethical and philosophical system founded by Confucius, and there's his dates. It focuses on humanism, personal and governmental morality, social harmony, and the importance of filial piety, respect for one's parents, elders, and ancestors. As twin pillars of Chinese thought, while Confucianism focuses on social order, active duty, and structured relationships, Taoism emphasizes nature, inner peace, and Wu Wei, action through non-action. Confucianism works to shape behavior in society. Taoism nurtures inner spirit and universal connection. So here's some key differences between the two. Confucianism, its primary texts are the Analects and the Five Classics, which outline ethical behavior, scholarship, and moral governance. Taoism, rooted in the teachings of legendary sages Lao Tzu and Chuangzi, its primary text is the Tao Te Ching, along with the Chuangzi, which focuses on the universal Tao or the way. Confucianism focuses on human-to-human relationships and building a just, stable society. Confucians believe society requires structure, strict moral examples, and rituals to function properly. Taoism focuses on human-to-nature relationships. Taoists believe that societal structures and strict moral codes are artificial and actually disconnect humans from the natural flow of the universe. Confucianism promotes active engagement and continuous self-improvement. Followers are expected to do the right thing out of benevolence and duty, even if it requires hard work and discipline. Taoism teaches Wu Wei, effortless action. Taoists believe in aligning with the natural rhythm of the universe, letting go of artificial control, and allowing things to unfold spontaneously without forcing outcomes. And so here we go. Primary goal. Confucianism, social harmony, moral perfection, and good governance. Taoism, spiritual freedom, inner peace, and harmony with nature. Rules versus freedom. Confucianism relies on strict codes of conduct. Taoism emphasizes spontaneity and discarding man-made rules. In terms of government, Confucianism, rulers should lead by moral example and rule with benevolence. Taoism, government is viewed as an intrusion. Rulers should minimize their interference. Key virtue for Confucianism is benevolence and humaneness. For Taoism, it's non-action, Wu Wei, and naturalness, and self-so, that idea that things express themselves authentically just as they are. Historically, these traditions were not seen as mutually exclusive rivals, but rather as complementary philosophies, balancing a Confucian life, active in civic duty and social responsibilities, with a Taoist life, retreating to nature and self-reflection in retirement. Still, Chuangzi criticized Confucianism's rigid rules, rituals, and moral hierarchies as an artificial external constraint that stifled innate human freedom, caused hypocrisy, and hindered people from responding spontaneously to life. If you do read any of the Chuangzi or Tao Te Ching, you see Confucius really being pretty sarcastic in some of the ways that he depicts the Confucianist way of approaching life. Okay, so here's the question. Having quickly gone through these, what Enneatype would you give Confucianism?
1.
We have George with a 1. Anyone else?
1 and 5.
1 and 5?
I think 1 and 8, I guess I would say.
No, don't put the 8s in there.
I would say 1. I would go with 1 too because they They want justice and they want to do things right and appropriately, and they like some structure.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
Their way or the highway.
All right, let's take a look at this. Confucianism is highly type 1 coded. Both align heavily on moral perfectionism, rigorous self-discipline, and structured social harmony. So the reformer, the perfectionist or the reformer, like type 1s, who are motivated by the desire to do the right thing and improve the world. Confucians believe society can only be perfected through moral cultivation and righteous behavior. There's an emphasis on rules. Type 1s are known for their strong internal conscience and focus on rules. Confucianism is built entirely on Li, proper etiquette, ritual, and social norms, and Ren, benevolence, prescribing an exact moral way to act in every human relationship. The Zhongzi, the Confucian ideal of as a superior person, closely mirrors the Enneagram 1's desire to live up to the highest ethical ideals. And then the shadow side. Just as one struggle with being overly critical, self-righteous, and rigid, strict adherence to Confucian hierarchy can sometimes lead to inflexibility and dogmatism. So we've got Confucianism tied to ones. I'm sure we can draw some other parallels. Now, what would you say the enneatype of Taoism most closely resembles?
That's a 9.
I think 7 too.
That's great, buddy.
Maybe a
I
9
think-
or a 4 even, because
A
the
4?
4 is an individualist kind of person. A 9 is the harmony, peacemaker.
Mm.
What, Judy, you were saying 7, you think, maybe?
I think a 7 too, because they're
Mhm.
spontaneous and loving nature, the outside world, and all of that. Yeah,
Mhm.
flexibility.
Any other thoughts?
Doubling down on my 9.
Okay. All right. So in doing the research I did, here's what I found. Because Taoism is a philosophy of balance, nature, and flow, any Enneagram type can practice it. However, type 9, there you go, buddy, the peacemaker, type 5, the investigator, and type 4, the individualist, are most naturally drawn to Taoist teachings because their core desires and struggles align with Taoist principles. Type 9, the peacemaker, the core of type 9 is a pursuit of inner peace, harmony, and avoiding conflict. This maps almost perfectly to the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, non-action or effortless flow, and letting go of ego-driven struggles. Now, type 5, the investigator, type 5 seek to understand the fundamental mechanics of the universe. They resonate with the Tao Te Ching's focus on quiet observation, detachment from material desires, and preserving one's internal energy or qi. And type 4, the individualist, type 4s are focused on authenticity, inner truth, and living according to their own nature. This mirrors the Taoist emphasis on unlearning societal expectations and returning to one's raw, uncarved, and authentic self. That in Chinese is called the Pu. Now, not to leave everybody else out, how are other types relating? Taoism acts as a tool that different types can use for specific personal growth. Type 1, they're going to mention type 1, the reformer. Type 6, the loyalists, often are drawn to Taoist philosophies of Stoicism. And if you're not familiar with Stoicism, that the path to happiness is found in accepting the present moment, exercising self-discipline, and focusing exclusively on what is within your control while letting go of everything else. Man, we need a lot more stoicism going on around here. And then balance to help quiet their overactive, rule-bound minds. Type 3, the achiever, and type 7, the enthusiast, and type 8, the challenger, are all highly yang in their daily energy. These types use Taoist principles to learn how to surrender control, slow down, and find stillness. And finally, type 2, the helper, drawn to the Taoist virtue of compassion and selflessness, often using it to establish boundaries and balance caring for others with caring for themselves. But I really thought it was interesting as I was reading through this, as you read Chuang Tzu, you get this constant kind of sarcastic needling and pointing at Confucianism, which was well established. Chuang Tzu comes about 200 years after Confucius, so it was already well established in their culture by then. And he's poking at it because of all the problems he saw with it. But it just seemed to me so type 1. And then Taoism itself, primarily type 9, but with other, types 5 and 4 kind of in there as well. But it's interesting how even these disciplines and these philosophies also can have enneatypes, because of the way that they're structured and the energy that they're coming from. So I just thought that was fascinating. And you got this kind of knocking between Taoism and Confucianism in ancient Chinese culture. Anyway, you get that for free. It's not going to be on the test. Don't worry about it. Any
It'll
thoughts
be in
along
the
those
email,
lines?
right? It'll be in the email that you send out.
I will put this in the email. Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you.
Any thoughts or comments on any of that?
Dave, can we back up just a little bit? I got a question. Sorry to go backwards here. The one's distortion of the original energy around this knothole of anger, the ego of the one begins to crystallize. What do you think he means by crystallize? Is that harden?
Actually, he means this is where it takes shape and form. It's the way he's used. This is a line he uses for every one of the types. He talks about the initial wounding that creates a subsequent development that is moving more and more toward the actual enneatype and away from the holy idea. And so what he calls that distortion is a knothole, and that knothole creates a spot around which the enneatype's personality, then he calls it crystallizes or hardens or takes shape and form. So
And that's the beginning of the ego kind of creation.
Yep. So the ego, the personality, the enneatype is going to be crystallizing, forming around this knothole, this distortion in the usual grain of the wood, if you will. That distortion that is coming from the inability to hold on to the original holy idea, which we got to realize is what is supposed to happen, right? We're not supposed to be able to hold on to it. It's what happens in child development of every human being.
It's the hero's journey, right?
I'm sorry, say again?
It's the hero's journey.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that. I mean, the wounding is always the start of the journey. This is really in a pre-conscious state, though. So it's not going to have the same effect as a hero's journey in the sense of the hero actually making choices, because the infant doesn't have that ability to make any choices yet. Things are happening to the infant, but the infant is pre-egoic consciousness, pre-literate, just can't conceive of things in words yet. So things are happening at the unconscious level for the infant. The knothole is forming. They understand what gives them pleasure and what gives them pain, but they really aren't, fully able to make their own choices yet. So little bit of difference there. But the point is that nobody stays in the original undifferentiated state. No one stays in the non-dual state that we're born into as infants. As soon as we become self-aware, we become dualistic. They kind of define each other. Self-awareness is a state of dualism because now we see ourselves as separate from and opposed to everything around. Before that, in the infant state, everything is one thing. There's no sense of self as opposed to anything else. I suppose you could say our dogs and cats are the same way. They don't perceive things dualistically. It's kind of all one thing. But to move to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right, in the garden, is to now have that dualistic ability. We can now separate good from evil. We can now separate ourselves from each other. But it's not an act of rebellion. It is what defines us as human beings, to have that self-awareness. So we're not supposed to stay children. We're not supposed to stay, quote unquote, innocent. We're supposed to move into this space. So it's natural. But then the spiritual journey is to take us back to the garden, to move us back into that non-dual state. But now it's volitional. We can choose to move into it. And we're going to have to balance it with duality, because there's no way we can live on this earth by being completely non-dual. That's going to have to be an oscillation. That's going to have to be a balancing act, coming back and forth, so that we can have a conversation like this. We can do what we need to do to stay alive, keep the lights on, plan for the future, learn from the past, all of those things. But then we can come back into perfect presence in the moment as well. So that's the balance that we're going to need to learn for the rest of our lives. Problem is, if we don't take the journey, if we can't learn how to come back into non-duality, then we'll never have that balance. Yes, Gail, you're muted, dear.
Can I share a quick story that I think really fits with what we're talking about? I had my surgery 4 weeks ago. I'll make it as quick and concise as I can. And the Tuesday, I had the surgery on Wednesday. The Tuesday prior was, you're going to have this procedure. You're not going to have this procedure. That was a lead up to the surgery. And I was just yo-yoed around, and I was like, whatever, but I was feeling it by the end of the day. And I was told, thanks for being such a team player.
Mhm.
And I was kind of at that point. And then the next day when we came, I started bawling before I got into the front door. And I'm like, what is this about? And it was deep. It was like, where's this coming from? What's this about? And it's not that I was afraid of the surgery, although I wasn't sure I needed it. We went back and forth a long time in deciding, and I got in and had to fill out forms, consents, release, all that. And Miss Cheerful, who is the patient coordinator, was there, and she looked at me and she said, "How are you doing today, Gail?" And I looked up at her and I'm like, how does it look like I'm doing? Are you so out of touch? Could you be more out of touch? And I just went back to my paperwork, and then I had to go in for an infrared sauna before I went for the surgery. And I was so thankful for that time, because I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And I realized I was out of control, totally vulnerable to everybody directing my schedule or my life. And I was criticizing them for all the things. I was finding the judgment on all along the way of things that weren't quite right. The doctor hadn't even spoken to me that, hey, we're ready for you for surgery tomorrow. All looks good. Nothing like that. And I'm like, that's weird. I would expect something more than that. And so anyway, so during the infrared, I just said, okay, that verse, be still and know that I am God, just kept coming through.
Mhm.
And I hung on to it. And it worked. It was good. And I walked out of there. I'm like, all right, let's go. But I saw my one all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, that is perfect. And that's what we're talking about. That's what a study like this can give us. This is what our contemplative practice can give us. This is what our spiritual journey can give us. Notice how it took a little bit during the day, but her awareness caught up to her in real time. And she
Yeah.
was just able to identify what's going on. I love when you say, where is this coming from? That's a perfect response to an emotional trigger like that.
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? Just question it. Accept it. It's yours, but where's this coming from? Is there a clear and present danger? Does the punishment really fit the crime here? Or is this
Yeah.
something that I'm importing into the moment? But for you to be
Exactly.
able to become aware of it and then kind of use it here, oh, this is my oneness coming out. This is the way I react in situations like this. And then do the opposite action and be able to come right back to the moment and connect. That's what this is allowing us to do, and why do we need to label ourselves? We're not really labeling ourselves. We're just identifying, and they're not necessarily weaknesses either. That's not the right way to look at this. It's our predilection. It's the way that we typically go about dealing
Yeah.
the challenges in life. And just knowing that's going to come up, that's going to be our go-to, that's going to be the first thing that comes up. We just realize, oh, okay, I see where that is. Yeah, that's my oneness coming up. That's my nineness, whatever it happens to be. But we don't have to let it rule us. We don't have to let it wag the dog. We don't have to let it pull us by the ring in the nose. We can make a different choice. And so, yeah, that's a great story. I love that. Yeah. That's why we do this stuff. I'm sure we can all think of times when we couldn't do this stuff. And you look
Yeah.
back and say, how could I have been? I mean, I know I do all the time. Sometimes I literally have to cringe, how could I have? But it's like Jesus said, I didn't know what I was doing, I literally didn't know because my awareness was not caught up to me yet.
A lot of times I can stay strong in being in control of, okay, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. But when it was all taken out from under me, I saw how vulnerable I became. And that's what I don't normally function in that mode, you know. So yeah, that was interesting.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk about point of avoidance, virtue, and vice of these type ones. So we're right in the middle of page 116. Type 1 is the only member of the Enneagram whose passion is identical to its point of avoidance. Interesting, huh? That combination erects a cruel cage indeed, and ones possibly suffer more within its confines than any other type. It makes the spiritual path for ones more than a little complicated. The practical problem for ones often has to do with a basic misunderstanding of what drives the type. Ones are often tempted to think that they will improve if they simply relax their standards, making them more adaptive and in line with the standards of everyone else. This will bring only superficial change, however. The root problem of the fixation does not lie in having inflexible standards. It lies in placing one's hope in the standards in the first place. You notice how I'm always saying, you can't obey your way into kingdom. How many times have I said that? You can't obey your way into kingdom. This is the same thing here. The ones think that they can obey their way, they can improve their way into the happiness that they seek. It just doesn't work that way, right? Standards belong to the domain of content, the world of form, the world of me. Standards are always relative to some point of view, which is why Jesus says, don't judge, because the standards that you use to judge are going to be levied upon you. This is exactly why. They belong to the domain of content, form, of egoic self. They're always relative to some point of view. We can say that an expensive car is better than a cheap one. And from one point of view, that is correct. The expensive car is likely to be larger, quieter, more comfortable, more elegant. Yet from another point of view, the cheap car could be considered better. It's likely to be smaller, more maneuverable, easier to park, more fuel efficient. We could make similar points about people, cultures, and moral systems, or anything else one could think of. Standards are always relative to judgments about content. Only when one leaves the domain of content altogether and enters that of being do standards disappear. So how would Jesus say that? Sell everything, give it to the poor, and come follow me. He would say you need to be born again. You're born of water, but now you need to be born of spirit. What he's trying to do is get us out of the dualistic way of thinking and perceiving and experiencing life and into a non-dual way. See how this is working? Only when one leaves the domain of content altogether and enters that of being, going from dualistic thinking and perceiving to unitive, do standards disappear. From the perspective of being, it can be seen that the root of the one fixation does not lie principally in the mind. The core of the fixation lies in an instinctive reaction, anger, to the fact that one is living an embodied existence. As soon as you are living an embodied existence, you are living a dualistic existence, right? The physical world necessitates us seeing things dualistically. Ones are first and foremost body types. The virtue for any type 1 is called serenity. Its practice, however, is not easy because in the early stages of spiritual work, most ones are tempted to believe that the virtue they need most is improvement. Self-improvement is a poor substitute for serenity. Ones can torture themselves and those around them with judgments about progress and lack of progress. It's easy to forget that spiritual work can be intrinsically rewarding and full of humor. There's an ancient Taoist saying, the perfect path is effortless. So we're getting back to Wu Wei, right? Non-doing. There is an ancient, its message is especially difficult for ones. The one's automatic tendency is to fight anger with perfection, understood as improvement. Whenever anger arises, ones feel that the situation has lurched too far toward yang. The anger simply feels too instinctual and out of control. They then want to apply more perfection, which they experience as forced compliance to standard. But such a remedy seems too passively yin and only creates more anger because the one's vital instincts to self-so run contrary to forced compliance. When we are talking about obedience, I often say that obedience is passive. And I never know if that's actually landing with people because we can talk about obedience, following rules as being active. We can say, yeah, I actively have to follow the rule. I have to actively have to accept the restrictions of the law. But really, it's passive. Just like he says, forced compliance here, that's passivity. Because we're trying to do something from the outside in. We're trying to comply with an outside shape, but it doesn't create any inward transformation. The inward transformation is what's really active. That forces everything to be initiated, from the center. And so the problem that the ones have here is they're trying to more and more comply. They're trying to more and more fit, put the square peg in the round hole. And as they feel anger, then they just try harder, but it just creates more and more anger because their instinctual self-so, the idea that who they really are can just flow out of them without trying to constrict it or having to try to bend it, runs contrary to this whole idea of a forced compliance. In the end, ones feel trapped between yang, anger, and yin, compliance. And remember that ones are reconciling types, right? They're constantly trying to reconcile between yin and yang. In a manner reminiscent of what happens to type 6 and 2 when they begin to constrict, Ones tighten down, trying to assuage each yang impulse with an equal and opposite yin impulse, increasing the vibration of their egoic oscillation to an intolerable pitch. All right. You three ones. How's that setting with y'all?
I can identify with trying to go along with things like, why do we need another alpaca? And when do I stand up and say, no more? And so that's how I see one example that I don't want to go into many more. We don't need marriage counseling here. But yeah.
Have you noticed Gail speaks a lot more when Bill's not around?
Yeah.
I like it.
No, that story that I told you, I was like, that was I would have told that last time I was on if it fit, but yeah. So it's not just that he's not here.
This was a pretty dense paragraph, Yeah. Are the concepts clear enough? Do you understand where he's going with this? I'm just trying to develop it a little bit, but I don't know how well I did. So that or the one's reaction to it.
How do I get to serenity?
He's going to talk about that later.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, hold on to that for a bit. We're not there yet. We're still defining the problem rather than how to swim out of it.
So I was at the bank the other day and I was just miffed because they wouldn't give me, I brought this humongous cashier's check from the escrow company and they would not give me $200 cash back for opening an account there. And I'm like, for real? That's our policy. And I said, well, you could call the title company. This is from a local bank. It's a cashier's check. And they said they were going to put an 8-day hold on it. And I said, in the mainland, that's illegal with check free. And I walked out of that bank and opened up a bank account with the competition. And I'm like, I spent 2 hours trying to get an appointment with this bank. And then I ended up just walking out. And I'm like, how come I think this way?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I was there. I had spent 2 days on the phone on hold for an hour, over an hour each time. And finally I got through and got an appointment. But then when I went over to the other bank, it seemed like it was a better deal. And they were much friendlier and the check was written off of their bank. So obviously they gave me money, but I don't know. I was like, I spent all this time researching. I thought they were the right bank. And then when I got there, I thought they were doing things that were not per federal banking because I've worked for a bank for the past 20 years. So I kind of know banking rules and stuff. And I just felt like they weren't keeping up with the banking regulations.
Well, Jennifer, actually, it sounds like the bank was being more one than you were.
Yeah.
You were reacting to their oneness, in your typical way. So, yeah, we just established that philosophies can have an Enneatype. Why not a bank, right? They're going to stick right to their policies. They're going to stick to the rules. They're not going to deviate from these because these are the rules.
Well, that was true. She asked the lady asked her bank branch manager, and the bank manager said no.
Okay, so he's a one, at least institutionally.
Well, you did the right thing. You moved on.
Right.
Yeah.
But your story is saying this, I won't ask what bank this is, but if this is the bank, and if I am going to be a customer there, I will choose not to go to that bank. I will go to the competition.
Mhm.
That's how it works. You're one of many. Pretty soon they won't be there 10 years from now, 5 years from now.
That's
Because
how you
we will leave.
establish your serenity.
Yeah.
And you let it go, and it often works out better the other.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
serenity. You go to the better bank.
Mm.
Okay, getting
Mm.
away from banks now.
Mm.
Oh, I wanted
Are you starting to get the sense of why ones are unique in terms of their path away and out of the stranglehold that Enneatype has on all of us? For their passion and point of avoidance to be identical, to both be anger, and how that kind of changes the calculus with ones, according to Schafer. And then this last paragraph that we just read that was very dense, but it was trying to explain why this anger feeds upon itself and puts the ones into a feedback loop and makes it more difficult for them to be able to move through. I'm just hoping that all of that is making sense to you, because
It does.
and Judy had mentioned to me that she was actually kind of disappointed in this chapter in the way that it was handling the ones, and it is different from the other 8. But he's seeing a qualitative difference in the ones and their situation. And so this is not exactly the same as a formula for the other 8 Enneatypes that we have discussed before. I just want to make sure that we have a kind of our handle on what it is that the distinction that he's making here.
When I was reading this paragraph, when it says, oh yeah, feels trapped between yang, anger, and yin, and then you feel like you want to avoid the anger, but then you feel angry, but then you want to reconcile into this. It's putting me in the spin where at the extreme of this, one can become neurotic.
Yes.
Betcha.
Yeah, Ellen, what's your point? Of course. Come on.
No, because I used to watch that show Monk
Mhm.
with what's his name? I forgot his name. Shalhoub.
Tony
Mhm.
Shalhoub, yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah, but
And
he's OCD, so that's a little different.
Okay. Well,
That's a personality disorder.
I see.
Enneatypes are not personality disorders.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you.
I have to go. My poor little granddaughter
Oh,
she's been so sweet. So I'm gonna say goodnight.
Good night.
This is
Bye-bye.
great. Good night. I'll watch it later.
Mm.
Bye.
Bye.
But Dave, we do have the ones under a lot of stress can look like they have OCD. Like that kind of like a disintegrated one will begin to look like they have some OCD going on.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to keep everything in its place and to keep everything just so. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
But they're not going to necessarily do what Monk was doing in that show,
Right.
touching the knobs and doing this and all the kind of stuff that was more characteristic of a personality disorder. But I get your point. Absolutely. But it is painting an interesting picture about ones here, and the kind of trap that they can be caught in, since anger and their point of avoidance are the same. So they're kind of running to and running toward anger, and then it loops them back and kind of puts them in a reinforcement kind of cycle.
I can add something here. I mean, I think what you said before, Dave, and explaining that the passion and the vice are on the point of avoidance are all anger. I mean, for me, as I've looked at my past, anger was something that I definitely wanted to avoid, and I learned that in my childhood because nobody voiced passionate feelings, for one, of any kind. And for me, I think I've been on a lifelong journey to recognize the various forms of anger that I experience, whether it's mild annoyance or irritation or frustration or outright losing it. and and I think I can remember maybe two experiences in my life where I got to that losing it point of view and point of action, and it was awful for me. Um, and I knew, from all of the things that I had been learning over time, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, mental health wise, um, that was not a productive response at all to trying to heal a relationship. And I think what helped me start to regain and come out of that, start to heal, um, was all of the things that I have learned about the importance for me is about going into that silent solitude stillness place to be able to sort things out, just to experience, meet where I was, move through it, and um, and acknowledge it, um, and admit it, and when needed to um, make an amends or a living amends, um, and that acceptance is huge, for me in terms of being able to let go of this stand against reality, that he talks about. Um, I don't want to resist that acknowledgement anymore. I'm it happens, and I know that resistance is there, but I'm better able in a more timely fashion to be able to meet it where it is, to grieve it, if that's what's coming up for me, shed a lot of tears, um, get really angry in my journaling, and let it out. Just, and then it calms me down, and I can much more easily allow that still small voice to come in and just hold me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, and give me that hug
Mm-hmm.
that you talked about on Sunday.
So you see what Judy's talking about is basically the same thing that Gail was talking about. It's letting your awareness catch up to you. Now she's using the tool of the journal to open up the space between the stimulus and the response. And by journaling, she's able to get that awareness and be able to then choose other than what the emotion would dictate.
Mm-hmm.
If she didn't do that, it would just be, just knee-jerk reaction, stimulus and response. But that's a tool that can be used. But for Judy's upbringing, nobody expresses the anger. Well, that just fits right into the one, right? The point of avoidance. Feel the anger, but you can't go there. Right. And I love the way he puts it. You're trapped between the yang, the anger, and the yin, compliance. And your type is to try to reconcile between the two. So
Yeah.
you're desperately trying to reconcile between the two, but the yin, compliance, feels like you're giving in to the passivity, and then it just creates more anger, and then you're back and forth and back and forth, and it's hard to get off of that loop.
Mm-hmm.
Schafer is painting this whole thing. And so then the ones tighten down, try to assuage each yang impulse with an equal and opposite yin impulse, increasing the vibration of their ego oscillation to an intolerable pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Until the moment that you can bring your awareness to bear in the moment, and then you can stop the spin cycle, and you can stop and make a different choice, get a breath in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, would be the serenity.
Nice.
Interesting stuff. Let's see, where are we at? Yeah, I guess we can go ahead and finish this section. the pivot of Tao, we don't have much left to finish ones for next week, and then we start the next part. But let's go ahead. The virtue of serenity allows people to leave the maelstrom of perfectionism fighting anger altogether. They can stop fighting against and begin to drop straight down into their experience, even if it happens to be that of anger. In this regard, it is important for ones to remember that serenity does not mean passive compliance to the rules of good behavior. Neither does it mean that a person simply gives in to rage. It does not even mean that a person just says and does nothing when angry. Serenity, experienced within the pivot of Tao, manages to turn the table on the whole cruel game of perfection versus anger. True serenity, from the Latin serenus, clear or unclouded, implies clear vision. It means that one sees all the way through the situation and perceives how each element of it selves acts as itself, as a manifestation of Tao.
Can you break that down a little bit more?
Okay. Basically, we're talking about, it's kind of what you just said. You know, maybe the way to understand it is through the welcoming practice. And I think next week we'll go a lot more in depth into the welcoming practice and what that actually is, how it works, and so on and so forth. But he says serenity allows people to leave the whirlwind, the maelstrom of perfectionism, of fighting anger altogether. They can stop fighting against and drop straight down into their experience. Well, that's what the welcoming practice is all about, you know? Rather than trying to keep this up in this virtual place where you are fighting against it, this is where Wu Wei comes in. Wu Wei would be that effortless action. Wu Wei would be moving with the direction and velocity of spirit rather than trying to fight against it, but to just accept the feeling that you're feeling. You're feeling anger right now. Okay. Doesn't mean you have to act on it and you're going to try to open up a space between stimulus and response, but you feel it. And it's okay that you're feeling it. It is the emotion that comes up. Remember, you get your emotions for free. You don't have any control over them. Therefore, you don't have any responsibility for them. They are what come up out of the unconscious, unbidden. You know, they're just there. And then that allows you to drop right down into the experience of whatever that is, even if it happens to be that of anger. And so the serenity, though, he's trying to define it here. It doesn't mean that you're passively complying again. That doesn't mean that you're trying just to fit in, that you're trying to look like what you think you're supposed to look like, that you're trying to improve your way, obey your way, you know, into the kingdom, into this place where you feel that happiness. You're not trying to use a Confucianistic type of way of complying. But it doesn't also mean that you're giving into the rage. You're finding this middle space between the two. And it doesn't mean that you're just quiet either. It doesn't mean that you're just going to be completely quiet. You're not going to say anything. You're just going to hold on like a, you know, like a corked bottle. When it's experienced within the pivot of Tao, it's a completely different thing. You're in this frictionless place within the pivot of the Tao. It's like that weightless place at the center of the centrifuge, right? And then the whole dualistic way of looking at perfectionism versus anger resolves back into non-dual unity, because the serenity allows you to just see the situation for what it is.
But see, I don't know if this is splitting hairs, but to me, it's like he's saying serenity allows you to leave the maelstrom of perfectionism and the fighting. But to me, it's like when you decide to leave the maelstrom of perfectionism and the fighting of anger, then you have serenity, is the way I see it.
Okay. Yeah, you're splitting hairs a little bit.
Huh?
Yeah, you're kind of splitting hairs. It's
okay.
it's
thing.
basically saying the same thing, you know, which comes first, the chicken or the egg. You know, the point is, though, he's defining serenity as this ability to be able to move through the horns of the paradox, or the contradiction, that are keeping the one continuing to oscillate between the two, and to move right down into the center, back into the experience of the moment, back into that frictionless, weightless place at the center of the spoke, and just see the situation for what it is. Experience it, but not let it force you into a reaction that is taking you out of the pivot. Now you're pushing the river again. Now you're pushing the rope again to be able to just be. And then out of that space, you can make a decision of what you want to do, but you need to be in that space first before it's going to be possible to make a decision that isn't just more of the feedback loop that you're in. I threw a lot of words at that. Is anything helping?
What's helping me?
Dave, it made me think of this whole conversation, made me think of a thought from Russ Hudson, who talked about, he said, if we're going to become fully enlightened beings, we don't become enlightened by disowning a part of ourselves. Like, we have to embrace all of ourselves, including our shadow self and things of that nature, including the anger, right? And this idea of allowing myself to, the way he described that, to just fall deep into it and experience it, right? So the idea is not that we're trying to be anger free. It's that we're trying to learn how to be present to our anger without being controlled by it.
That's
So
great.
there will be things happening that will get us angry, right? And another thought that popped into my head comes from a poem I had from Lao Tzu on my wall like about 20 years ago. And I don't remember the whole poem, but the couple of lines were, if you accept what is weak for the strength it has, and accept what is dim for the light it gives, this all will go well. Like, this is called living gently or something along those lines. So the idea of what's the term? The self-so,
Gérard.
self-so, right? So when the perfectionist accepts that they're, well, perfectly imperfect, they're perfect with imperfections of, they can be perfect and be angry at the same time.
Perfectly angry.
Perfectly angry, right? I think that could be the pivot point there. And I like the way you define serenity a couple of book studies back, where serenity is not the absence of anger, but in allowing myself to be fully present and maybe even not disturbed by my anger, if that makes any sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense because I feel like I spend a lot of time avoiding anger.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, like, instead of feeling angry, I try to rationalize why I shouldn't feel this anger instead of actually, exactly like you're saying, just go with it. It probably would last half the time if I just went into the anger mode and just said, observed why I'm angry. Instead, I try to deny it, like thinking I shouldn't feel the anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then I rationalize it, and then I try to absorb it, and then it still doesn't really change the situation. It just prolongs it.
Right.
So I think exactly like what you're saying is something I need to work on because it doesn't go away.
And you think about it this way too, all of us, but Jennifer especially, this whatever you resist, you're giving more power to, you know? And so you don't want to do that. Just let it come over you. It's your anger. It's we need to make friends with our emotions. They are what they are, they're ours, but they also came unbidden. We're not responsible for having them. We do. Okay, acknowledge that. When we go through the welcoming prayer, we'll talk more about this, or the welcoming practice. Acknowledge it, but then don't act on it until you figure out where it's coming from. We're coming all the way back to what Gail said. Where is this coming from? That's the great question. Where is this coming from? And the ancillary to that is, what am I afraid of? If there is a clear and present danger in your moment with you, then maybe anger is the correct response, and it's giving you the motivation to act in a way that's appropriate to the moment. But 9 times out of 10, that won't be the case. The anger is being conjured up out of your unconscious because your unconscious has been reminded of a past hurt or trauma or whatever it is. And there is no place for that anger in this particular moment. And so as soon as you ask the question, if you have enough awareness, then you can make the distinction between the two. And then you can channel your inner Ronald Reagan and go, there you go again, Jimmy, and just laugh at it, and it's just like, oh, Mary and I were just talking about this afternoon. It's just like, man, I thought I put a stake through the heart of that thing decades ago, and here it is again. Are you kidding me? But you can just laugh at yourself and go, wow, where does this stuff come from? But thank God I don't have to act on it because I'm aware of it right now and I can make that choice. And it just takes all the air out of the tires of that particular thing. Who did I cut off?
I was just going to say, it goes back to Roar. Didn't he just say everything belongs?
Everything
You just gotta let it be, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that for Jennifer, like, you're trying to deposit money in this bank and they're making it way more complicated than it needs to be. That would annoy the hell out of anybody, I think. Like anger is probably like not rage, but anger and frustration. Like when we feel interfered with, anger is a normal response to that, where it's like, especially when you're up against that perfectionist energy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said the bank was being much more one than Jennifer was. See, Jennifer, your response seemed really measured and appropriate to what was going on. You said, okay, you don't want my business? I will take my big check elsewhere.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Might have been some projection going back and forth there as well.
I'm less philosophical, but all this discussion, and you talked about feedback loop, and you talked about acceptance, the perfectionism. I was listening to a podcast, I think it was about a year ago. It was by a psychologist, and he described something where you want to perfect something. Maybe it's the compulsion. Maybe he was talking about OCD. I'm not sure, but he said by fixing this, let's say it's a crooked picture, but you cannot stand it, so you fix it. So that in itself is a reward. It took away that anxiety. So what he's saying is for the person to say, yes, I feel so anxious, I need to align this thing. You let it go. Don't fix it. Although you have that discomfort, allow that discomfort, accept the discomfort. And as you do it more and more and more, then you have serenity.
No, I disagree. You got to fix and straighten the picture.
You got to fix it. You got to fix it. You got to fix it.
Yeah, that's right.
Fight her off the wall, Ellen.
I remember one book where the author was talking about a perfectionist where the guy put together a table or something and there were a couple of screws missing. And his clinician told him, just, leave it there and, just ignore the screws. And he said a week later, he had to get that table out of his house. Like he just couldn't tolerate it. And I think we're never going to stop being a perfectionist, right? In that way, like the solution is never to shoot for imperfection. Like that is intolerable for the perfectionist. It's to, see the perfection in imperfection, maybe. Right.
I had some people work for me that were very satisfied with being imperfect. And they did imperfect work.
Let me tell you something that's imperfect.
Okay.
I would have I would have frowned upon.
No, wait.
Okay.
Look at the time.
Funny.
Look at the time.
Okay. So the hem of my pants were unhemmed. I was at work. I didn't have time. I used staples. I wouldn't have done this 20 years ago. So I have accepted that.
Well, Good for you, Ellen.
Good for you, Ellen.
Godspeed.
Oh,
He's not a perfectionist.
You're not a one, so there.
Yeah.
right.
Everybody be angry and sin not.
All right. Yes, Scott is still with us. Scott.
I'm still here, guys.
What
Thank you
is it?
for letting me participate. Had a good time. Mother God, we're grateful to be here, and we're grateful for what we've learned as we spend this time with each other and with you, and go on our little adventure where we connect like this. And we learn a lot, Mother. So we're grateful, and we want to express our gratitude and tell you how much we love you. And we just pray all the prayers and our thanks and say our amen in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
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 Amen. Thanks, everybody. Great conversation. We'll see you Sunday.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody. See you guys.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
Everybody.
Dave,
Good
Bye,
night.
Dad.
Yes.
you would love it as you guys were talking about perfectionism and this and that. I get to Laura's house and I see all these weeds. It's like, oh my God, it's driving me nuts. So what did I do? Started de-weeding as we guys were talking. I'm like going, I wonder if I'm a one, because it was driving me crazy.
See, Frank, how you are. Mindfulness, my friend, mindfulness, one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Good job.
Okay, talk to you later.
Okay. Good night. Good night,
Good night.
Jordana.
Good night.
See you Sunday. Oh, I hope I'll see you Sunday. Maybe.
No, not this Sunday. Maybe
Not
next
this
week you might see me for my birthday, but that's about it.
Okay, that's a deal.
So you can talk to Vernon on Sunday because he'll be there, and so will my mom, but I won't be there, but they too will be there. So
Okay.
so you can talk to Vernon and see what he says, so you can see me.
Okay, dear.
Right?
Good night.
Bye.